Hi everybody, welcome to Village in the City Call 3. My name is Mark McKergow, I'm the founder of Village in the City and I'm based in the West End of Edinburgh in Scotland. And we have people joining the call from all over the world today, which is fantastic. Some of them are already village builders, other people are interested in the project. And we'll have the chance to talk about the project a little bit more later on. But Village in the City is about building micro-local communities as a post-COVID response to improve our lives, to improve the lives of those around us, to build resilience and to build empowerment. I'm doing that here in the West End of Edinburgh, and other people are doing it all over the world. And we are building resources and building a community of village builders together. And I'm very excited to welcome for today's call, Richard Lucas. Richard is on our advisory board, and he is a social entrepreneur and a TEDx organizer and general whiz at getting people together in all sorts of different ways. And he does that quite a lot in Krakow in Poland, but also in various international settings. And Richard is the guest speaker today, and he's going to be talking about how to get your village off the ground, and indeed how to get any kind of volunteer type project, social project started. And I know Richard is going to have a poll for us in just a moment. If you'd like to put questions in the chat as Richard goes along, please do. We'll both be looking at that. And also there'll be a chance for some questions and discussion. After that, then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Village and City project and the idea of putting your village on the map. And then we'll have time, I hope, for a short breakout room session, have a chat with some other people from all over the world before the end of the call. Without further ado then, I'm going to hand over to Richard. And of course, for everyone, just remember in Zoom, you have a choice between speaker view and gallery view. And it's up to you to say how you want to engage with everybody else. Okay, Richard, welcome to the call. Lovely to have you with us.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and thank you everyone for joining. It's very important in any event to have a positive atmosphere. So let's start by giving Mark and all of you a round of digital applause, which you can do like this or like this. And if you see your reaction button, you can also do a thumbs up. But it's a great feature. It's really important to radiate positivity. I see lots of thumbs up. It also makes me feel wonderful because having said praise Mark, I kind of take that on me as well. Imagine that you want to build a village really badly. You've heard about this idea, but you just don't know how to go about it. Just imagine how that feels. It's probably quite frustrating, quite alarming, quite disconcerting. You're trying to do something you've never done before. And I'm going to spend 10 minutes or so, maybe slightly longer, just running through, a way of going about it that I'll describe with a few sort of references to my experiences of getting things going. But perhaps before I do that, I'd like to get a sense of who I've got here with respect to volunteering. So I'm going to put a poll on the screen for about 10 seconds about your experience of running or being involved in voluntary activities. So you should see a question coming up on the screen now. And it's about whether you've been a volunteer, have you led a volunteer group, or have you founded a volunteer group? And I'm just seeing the results coming in now. And the vast majority of people here, I'm going to end the poll in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1, end poll. And here we have the results. I hope you can share results. So I hope you can see that on the screen. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so 3/4 of the people here have experience of being a volunteer. A full 60% have been leading volunteer groups, and about a third of the people here have founded one. Obviously, I don't know that much about your sense of prior knowledge, but I wanted to have a feeling of who I'm talking to. Most of you have some experience of the variable joys of running or being involved in volunteering. And I say variable intentionally because one of the points I want to make is that it's not always easy. And the first thing I'd say is that if you want to get a village going, which is definitely something that I believe is worth doing, you have to accept that there's a risk of failure. The flip side of success is a risk of failure. There's a risk of failure, and there's a certainty that some of the people you talk to will reject your idea and tell you that you're crazy. And you should just clock that. The first thing is, like, on the one hand, you're trying to do something that's not been done before in your area. On the other hand, it can be fun and challenging. And certainly some people, you'll get pushback from people who either will say at the start, this is a crazy idea, and perhaps a couple of years later, when you've succeeded, say, well, it was just waiting to happen. So that's one thing, is getting the right mindset. And setbacks and adversity in doing things that are worth doing is inevitable. I realize I've got a presentation I want to share with you, so hopefully, if I click on here we go. That's one thing. Another point I want to make is that I don't know if you know the acronym WWF, MNN, WFY. What that means is, what works for me may not work for you. Okay, and it's your village. So don't feel that my advice is like a Bible. I'm certainly ready to support and share both during this call and afterwards, but it's not inevitable. The idea of a village and how you do it matter. The way you do this will have a big impact on your chances of success. And this isn't a sales document to persuade you of the idea. This isn't a sales document to persuade you of what running a village is like. I'll just remind you, as Mark said, questions are welcome. Feel free to type them into the chat box. So before you kick off, it's a really good idea to have a sense of what motivates you, what would success look like for you if you're the founder. And it might be people wandering down the street who you previously ignored each other saying hello to each other. It might be that you're passionate about loneliness and social isolation, and you want in your community that to be impossible. But it needs to work for you. I'm sorry about the typo. I don't like typos in my own document. Success obviously is spelt wrong. My definition of success includes spelling success successfully, so I failed in that. But will your definition for success inspire others? Below you can see a TED circle. That was a TED circle between my home in Krakow, Poland, and in Tel Aviv we had on the other end another circle. And I had this great feeling that I'd achieved something I really felt was wonderful, bringing two diverse communities. Poland and Israel don't have the easiest history, but somehow through the magic of this TED Circle initiative, we could bring people together. That inspired me. But it's not just for you. You have to think, will your idea of success inspire other people? A village is a community. It's not just about you. And so you need to think about your local community. These are things I snapped as I wandered around. This is mostly from my holiday here in Scotland. You see, notice there are community notice boards here. That's in Mallaig near Skye. That's in a supermarket. But there's another notice board here, if you can see my mouse, in Taiwan. You always get notice boards, and a notice board may be part of what the local community looks like. But as you look around your local community, you have to sort of think, who does what? I've also got the cover of a parish magazine from Somerset, where my parents live. In the parish magazine, there's what goes on in South Petherton. There are lists of things going on, but you don't want to kick off your village without being aware of what else is going on in the village, or what's happening already. Because you might have an idea of having a Christmas party, but if it turns out that someone has been organizing a Christmas party for years, they're going to think you're badly informed and you don't know what's going on. So one thing is just use internet research to see who does what, where they're doing it. But also you have to talk to people. As you talk to people about your idea of a village, because you will need to get away from your screen and either on the phone or preferably face to face, go out and meet people. If you don't feel you can do that, you probably can't build the village, because the village is about people physically meeting. So don't just use email, get on the phone and go and talk to people. And that's a way to start building a team and finding allies. And do avoid this sort of bubble thing that get away from the idea of just being PLUs, people like us, that you might be a TEDx organizer and hang out with people who are into TED and TEDx, but you need to talk to the youth club, the church, the humanists, the atheists, the dog lovers, the ecologists. I mean, you probably have a limit of people you don't want to talk to based on the Village Manifesto, because we all want to be inclusive and include people, but it's a great opportunity to get outside your comfort zone, because you need to think like, who have you got? And remember that the most community-minded, positive people on your street may be involved in things that aren't local. They might be part of the city football team. They might be part of Amnesty International. They might be part of the bird watchers. But the proactive people in your community will almost always be like a concentric circle. They'll have other interests, but you want to find out what they're into to see what you can bring from their walks of life into your village, and vice versa. And as you see what's going on, look for venues, note where things are happening. I think I snapped, there's a workshops going on in a hub somewhere. There's a church room. This is just in the village I was walking through yesterday, but you need to figure out where you can meet. It might be as simple as a cafe. The next thing I would strongly say, think about an event. Even if you don't have your event might be 3 weeks away, 3 months away. Say you want to get people together, and it's a kind of meta meeting, your first event, because what you're doing is saying, this is an event where we're going to talk about what we're going to do. It's an event where we're going to discuss at our event what our goals are. And if you want to build community, if you can just make that a regular habit, at some level you've succeeded. But the fact that you're going to be organizing something down the line gives you the excuse to go and talk to people. And depending on who they are, they might be a community leader, a local policewoman, they might be a youth group leader. You can say, perhaps you'd like to say something at our event, or perhaps you'd like to contribute somehow. But because you're having an event, it's so much better to go to people saying, I'm inviting you to speak. Mark, that's my 10-minute marker. I've just gone for 10 minutes. So that means I'm about halfway through. Is that right in my timing, Mark? Yeah, okay. So resume. But another thing is, don't be worried if you only get 3 people showing up. I've organized events to which 1,000 people have come, and I've organized events to which no one's come apart from me. Like, if more than one person comes, it's great. And you have to be aware of the fact that a lot of people will be waiting to see what it's like before they decide to come. So you have to, on the one hand, create the impression that everyone's coming, but internally not think that it's that important. It may be more important for the people who show up than for you, but you have to sort of get this sense that you're bringing people together for something that's slightly bigger than just you and them. If 3 people show up, praise them. Don't say, oh no, only 3 people showed up. You say, great, it's 3 people have shown up. And you definitely need to be looking to agree some actions coming out of talking to people. Randy may know this, that I organize events before TED events around the world. And if you have an event 3 or 4 weeks or months away, you can build community in planning the event, that in fact the people who you would expect to come to your event, you say, would you like to come to my event? Mark, Jenny, Leah, Nick, Paul, these are the names I can see. If they say yes, it's a great idea. You say, well, look, in a week's time, we're going to have a quick call, a quick meeting to talk about what our event is about. So your preparation for the event can be part of the community building process. And that is something that I found. I've had 3 or 4 I had 3 or 4 calls before an event that was a first-time event, and the calls became a community building exercise. And I don't know if you can see here, that's a Google form on the left and the right. You can, if you send out, you're dropping leaflets, you're ringing on doorbells, you're calling people up, always be ready to send them a link to something where they can sign up. And there's this great question you can always put on any form: how can you help? And you've no idea how people can help, but you have to get across the sense that this isn't you laying on something for everyone else. This is a joint effort where you're asking everyone how they can contribute. In terms of what your kickoff event should look like, this is from something I founded for Cambridge University, which was 4 years ago. I started something called CAM Entrepreneurs, and that was to support business and social entrepreneurship among current alumni, current students, and others, which in fact means everyone. But it's important to have, like at the beginning, it's a great idea to have informal networking. You register people, you slap a sticky label badge on them, and you welcome them. So it doesn't matter if people are slightly late, because the first half hour is a soft start. Then you have introductions and welcome. And if you say you've got 10 or 15 people in the room, you say, right, I want everyone just to stand up, say who they are, what they do, why they've come, and how they can contribute. And that actually can turn into a fascinating part of the meeting. That's what I call the open coffee introduction, where you just say, everyone in the room just say why you've come. And you may be horrified that someone says, I want to deal with the drug gang in number 4 on your street. I mean, at least it might not be why you're meeting, but it's a good thing to know. But what you're looking for is areas of common concern and interest, which can become your first things that you're working on. Obviously, you have a chance to present what your village in the city idea is, what your vision is, but also you might have a guest speaker, but I would keep it very open. Make the participants in your first meeting the primary part of the content. Make it all about them talking about what they want, and introduce housekeeping rules that you encourage people to take ownership of the things they're suggesting they're suggesting the village should do. In terms of activities, I won't read these out. These are potential things that you might want to do. I wrote Village Fete, that's an old British tradition, but distinguish between one-off events, once a year event, towards things that are more regular. I wouldn't go, I mean, you might want to have a Christmas party, a summer fair, but you can't build a community around once a year. So look for regular things, maybe a monthly coffee morning. It could be meet the dustman. It could be inviting a local councillor in, or you might have a dog walking club, a newcomer club. I'm not going to tell you what it should be. I'll share this afterwards, but you need to have ideas that enough people want to work on, that you can work together on that thing. And I put projects. It could be let's have a street notice board. Let's have an anti-graffiti initiative. Let's clean up the park. Do the flower beds. Fight litter. Something like that. Final tips and tricks. You don't need money. You absolutely don't need money. Some people assume the first thing you have to do is fundraise. You can meet in a cafe, you can meet in a pub. You don't need money. Don't get distracted by fundraising. But do remember cost benefit analysis. Do things that are cheap and easy. Don't try and put up a new community hall. The dog walking is cheaper than a building. Make your meetings fun and social. If people enjoy coming to meetings, they'll come back. If they don't, if you make them boring, no one will come. So or the wrong people will come. Get people talking about what they want to do. Encourage people who suggest ideas to lead on them. Remember, the good leader follows their troops, and the idea of the easy wins. Be looking out for things that you can say you're succeeding on doing. Don't be too ambitious at the start. Do simple things. Get the contact details of everyone who signs up. Eventbrite is great for this, but a Facebook event where you just have people clicking to join will be really hard to track. So you need to get people's contact details. Write your meeting summary before your first meeting, and then just fill in the blanks, because you're creating an impression of your organizational skills right from the start. You never have a second chance to make a first impression. So you're going to send an email out to everyone there with like who's going to do what by when. Embrace rejection, as I said. If someone says your idea is absolutely terrible, a lovely passive-aggressive thing to do is say, that's so kind of you to say that. That's so useful, because I can only get better on rejection. Thank you so much. Could you go into more detail of what you think we should be doing instead? And you can expect some rejection. And remember that if you have more than one person, you're succeeding. I strongly encourage you to get building on your villages. I hope this has been useful. By the way, I've set up 35 businesses, and 2/3 of them have died. I've set up literally more than 10 non-profit type organizations, and some of them are thriving, others don't. You can't guarantee success, but if you don't try, you'll never know. And if possible, I will come and visit you in your villages at some stage in the next 5 years. So I hope you invite me. With that, I'm going to hand the microphone back to Mark. How was I on timing?
Very good, Richard. Thank you so much. Well done. Bravo. Gosh, a blizzard of ideas there. Thank you very much indeed. So we have the chance for questions. If folk have them, you can either type them in the chat or you can wait. I've got you on gallery view at the moment, so if you want to wave your hand around, I can. Jenny, is that a question or just an applause?
You're muted.
Just applause.
Just applause.
Applause
okay.
for Richard.
Thank you. So Randy has a question, I think. Randy.
I have a comment. Richard is, as I've known him, very thorough in his planning and his analysis. And as he went through, have a plan in mind, do an environmental analysis, host a starting event, and all of these things, I kept thinking, well, what I have here in Lincoln, Nebraska, broke all of those rules. It just kind of organically happened, but that is, I think, incredibly unusual. So, Richard, I just want to say I appreciate the good thought that you've shared. And
yeah, I mean,
if I ever start another village, I'll certainly follow these guidelines.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I'd comment about sort of getting to know what's going on in your local community. This is a standard consulting methodology. You start by assessing the current situation. You know, you need to know where you're starting from, and you might be in a very poor area with huge social problems. You might be in a prosperous middle class street where money is not a problem. So you have to tailor your community activities to your specific local conditions. And there was a great charity called Hand in Hand, which formed village self-help groups in the developing world. And they always started by making a self-help group where they just discussed how things are now and how they were some time ago, to get a sense of change, what was changing negatively and what was going up and what was going down, because the understanding of the problems the community had was the driving force to what kinds of collective action they could take to solve the problems. So just sort of getting a sense of your current community is, and I think it's a good idea in general, but this is an excuse to do that.
Thank you, Richard. Other questions, folks? Shona, is that a question?
Hi, yes. Thank you for that really inspiring input. Really enjoyed it. Really interested in your thoughts on how you define your village, because I think, you know, a village, if you like, has clear boundaries. I think a village in a city, I'm just curious as to thoughts. I've got some, but just curious as to thoughts as to, yeah, how you define your village.
I'm going to let Mark take the majority of that, but I was thinking about this as well, and thinking that certainly you'd want your village to have guests, that a village shouldn't be an island or a sort of a fortress. So, you know, you might have someone from another part of your city where there's no village who's really keen on the idea and wants to help you. And it would be lunatic to say, no, you can't come to our village events. And so, I mean, you could have like honorary villager or something like that, but, you know, common sense. But I think Mark, in the manifesto, it says about walking distance, doesn't it? Is that one of them?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, Shona. I think you can walk across it in 10 minutes as a starting point. It's not the finishing point. It can be as little as one street, as Randy has proved, or it might be a kind of identifiable patch, you know, of a village, or it might just be you declare your street and the streets around you to be a place because you feel that there's something interesting and valuable that you want to connect with the people there. And I think you know, we shouldn't be too constrained about this. But the thing is, it's smaller rather than bigger. You know, a bigger village is not necessarily a better village, in my view. In fact, some very effective communities can be very small because they're tight, people know each other, you can engage easily, and so on. So here in the West End of Edinburgh, for example, where I am, we can walk across our village in about 10 minutes, but there are several thousand people who live in that patch. It's pretty densely populated. But I think if you're talking about needing to get on a bus from one end to the other, then that's probably more than one village. Is that a sort of helpful start?
Really helpful. Yes, thank you very much.
Jenny has a question, and then Nick.
No, it was a comment really on that very thing, that it's amazing how many relatively small areas have names already. And when we lived in London, we were amazed to have heard that there are 600 plus recognisable names of villages in London. And in this city, Edinburgh, every bus stop has got a name. So there are names, or, there are names. And that may help to define in some way, or even parts of the bus route, what you're talking about.
Thanks, Jenny. Nick, did you have a...
Yeah, mine's a bit of an observation as well. I've been talking to the people in Edmonton, Alberta about what they've done in their Abundant Community Alberta setup. And they actually designed the city so that they were suburbs that were deemed to be village-sized, that had their own shops and you could walk across them. And so they've actually purpose-built the city to match how they'd want to try and people identify in neighbourhoods, which I thought was marvellous. My challenge is that I'm trying to do things for a postcode, which is a town of 20,000 people. But recognising, I think within that, there are probably going to be 6 or 7 villages. Because there's a council estate where the people on that estate will recognise each other as being part of a neighbourhood. And then there's a housing estate up the hill at the other end of town, which wouldn't recognise them. And I think we just have to recognise, although I'm trying to do something on the scale of a town, within it, we're going to have cells or villages, whatever we call them, or neighbourhoods, which will identify with each other much better. And
yeah,
so I think that's for me is quite important to juggle the tension between the two. We want to do something on a town-wide initiative, but recognise people will identify with their neighbourhoods. And even within EH26, we've had to set it up so that people outside EH26 can get involved, because the postcode doesn't naturally fit within what the community boundaries are either. So we've had to do that in order to get government funding, ironically, and define that we are EH26, but it won't stop us from having friends, associates, whatever names we choose for them, from people outside who are interested in what we're doing.
I think another concept of definition is also to do with time, that, you quite often get older people who own their houses and a lot of younger professionals who are in some sense transient, who are renting. So they might be passing through your community, and it's really, I'd say it's a really important idea to have a sense of like a newcomer's role, that if people are new on your street, they can be a member of your community, both from the moment they've arrived, but also perhaps some kind of alumni sense, that someone who came from your street and is coming back, they might be coming back at Christmas or coming back at certain times of year. There might be a sense of a diaspora of your street, and there might be someone coming back who could contribute something or share something, and it might be a mentoring, or it's hard to say what it would be, but if you can make it not just geographical but temporal. I think one of the beauties of this is the chance of intergenerational communication. You get a lot of younger people who come from fairly troubled families, and a lot of older people who are quite lonely. And there's a potential, and you can get too ambitious, but even if you get one teenager befriending one older person, or vice versa, that's a huge win for those two people. And that's a sort of serendipitous thing that can happen once you get people together. And for each project you need someone who kind of owns it, who says, yeah, I'll take care of monitoring that one. But it just depends what people in your community want to happen.
Joan has asked a question in the chat, Richard. How do you make sure you don't exclude people, she asks. Here, some work 9 to 5, others work evenings and come home at 1 in the morning and sleep all morning. It's a highly populated area of flats.
I think that's a great question. And I would say that although I've emphasized the importance of face-to-face as opposed to online, one of your research of what's going on should include online groups, other meetup groups, other Facebook groups for your area. Quite often there are. I discovered when I started looking into this, and so obviously if it's online, people can come together, and then I think it's, you have to think about time of day. The open coffee Krakow meetings I run meet between 8 and 9 in the morning, with the idea of it's before people go to work. But I would say have a mixture of different types of events at different times of day. And when I started my alumni group for Cambridge University, I'm 54 years old. I was 50 then. I was by far the youngest person involved, and I was told that I was told this was not meant to be. It had become old men, grey-haired men in suits meeting during working hours to watch the boat race or the rugby, drinking sherry. So it was obviously for retired people. And I think that once the first step to solving a problem is to diagnose it, and if it's important for you in your village to address that, then you just have to certainly have the ability to register online, and then have an onboarding process. If you're the leader, you chat to each person who signs up, get to know them, say, well, who are you? And if they say, I work nights, you say, well, when would, what sort of meeting would you be able to come to? And then you could even organize it around them, if you've got the energy.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I mean, just to my own story about starting up here, I followed Richard's advice unwittingly and had a look around, and I found a Facebook group with 19 people in it. It's called West End Local Residents, and joined and made some useful contributions, and then went and had a chat to the guy who set it up last year, and we decided to leaflet the whole neighborhood to say there's a Facebook group, and we now have 550 members. That's as of in the last month. So lots of demand for that. The other thing I did was find allies, which is what Richard mentioned. So not only the guy who ran the Facebook group, and I help him run the Facebook group, but also one of the traders, one of the shopkeepers here, who runs a shop called Paper Tiger, which sells lovely stationery and things. He delivered something to me just before lockdown, and we had a little chat on the doorstep. And so I contacted him, and he was very, very keen. And he's been in business for over 20 years in our area, and he knows everybody. So he was very keen as well. And so between the Facebook group and Michael, the Paper Tiger man's connection with the local traders, we've got some ins, and we're now starting to looking to organize an open weekend where we get the locals talking to the traders by locals wearing badges saying, I'm a West Ender. And the shop's offering a little sort of free biscuit with your coffee or something like that, and a way of getting people talking to each other. So
I didn't share it. I have more slides, and I'll obviously send it to Mark as a PDF so it can be shared later. But in terms of getting the word out, certainly putting up a notice on, if there is a community notice board, the person who runs it should be a good person to talk to, and there's probably a key and a phone number of who you have to talk to. But even if you don't have a date, say you want to have a startup meeting about village in the wherever you are, about getting our village in the city going, giving your email address or your phone number, but also having a leaflet that's a copy of the poster, and even ringing on doorbells as you put it through. And if you're a bit nervous, if you've got a friend, go with your friend, and people will be so relieved that you're not some kind of crazy, I don't want to be prejudiced, but a salesman of a product, salespeople for a product you don't want to buy, or you're actually inviting people. So it's everything. It's there isn't one way to do it: online, face to face, making allies, getting the word out. But I could talk for a while about that, but I think it's probably not the best use of time to go into too much detail.
Okay, well, thanks, Richard. We'll look forward to seeing your slides later on. So, folks, I just want to share briefly about what we've evolved in the last month or so since the last call. And one of those things is called Put Your Village on the Map. And this is the web page of about Put Your Village on the Map. And as you can see, there's a map on it. And there are currently 3 pins in the map, which is very exciting. We have me here in the West End in Edinburgh with our village group. We have Randy in the Russo neighborhood of Lincoln, Nebraska. And we have Leia in the neighborhood that I can never pronounce, which is part of Sofia in Bulgaria. and Leah can perhaps tell us the name of it if she unmutes herself.
Dragalevci.
Dragalevci, thank you.
Dragalevci, it's part of Sofia.
It's part of Sofia, and so we have 3 villages so far in our community, and you can join us. So here's the thing, in order to put your village on the map, you need a team of at least you and 2 others, 3 people. And there's a little form to fill in. There's a link on there. It's a Google form, which only one of you needs to complete, but you can then, fill that out to say, we want to be in village in the city, and that will get you access to our resources and our Facebook group and so on. And of course, you'll be part of our community. Now, at the moment, that's all widely open to the public anyway. At some point, the Facebook group will become Village Builders only at some stage. And we are about to launch our Village Builders Handbook, which is currently being typeset and made to look nice. The first issue of that will be coming soon. And you don't need any official backing from your community to do this. You just need to be keen, and you need to want to make a difference where you are. So there's various FAQs and things on this page, and I'll put the link in the chat so everybody can see it. There is the link to that page, and we would love to add more pins to our map. There's no charge for this. It's all being offered by me, by people here, by our company, and by the Wellbeing Economic Alliance, who are also supporting our work, which is very exciting. So, and of course, you should all sign up for information at Village in the City, which you can do anywhere on the website. So that's I'm really excited about this. It's starting to gather some momentum. So, stop that sharing. So it's time to have a little chat, I think, with some of our village builders who are here. So I'm going to open up some breakout rooms. And it's a random grouping. Just have a little chat with the people who you find there, find out where they're from, find out what their hopes are for their village and where they are in the kind of process of starting it up at the moment. And just I give it about 8 minutes or so, and then we'll all come back together and talk about the next steps. So I'm going to make some breakout rooms now. Enjoy yourselves. So, hi everyone. So we just have a few more moments in the call. First of all, there's a chance for anyone to say anything you would like to, either to say what your plans are for your village, or your thoughts, or a question for me about the project, or a question for Richard, anything you like, before we talk about the next call and what's happening in the meantime. So, chance for anyone who'd like to say something. So we have Nick first, and then
just very briefly to say, as on a Zoom call this morning, we're deciding what to do next. We've got an overarching vision for what we want Pennycook to be as a flourishing community, and we're going to hold a celebration event for all the people that have volunteered during the lockdown to recognise what they've been doing, and to use that event on the back of that to actually launch the vision and to invite people to say what can they offer if they haven't offered something already.
Wonderful.
That's a very nice idea, Nick. Thank you. Yeah.
If I might jump in, and then I have to run. I read about a woman in another city that started a little gratitude tree, and she put a box out with some tags in it, put some string in a tree, and said, write down what you're happy or what you're thankful for. And people wrote a lot of notes and hung them in the tree. And so it's just an informal way of inviting people to share positive things in life.
That's a great idea, Andy. Thank you.
I think a volunteer appreciation event, we did that, was at TEDx Kazimierz, my TEDx, we did that, we've done that 3 times, and it's a great way to like get together with positive people, because the sort of people who are involved in volunteering are exactly the sort of people who will potentially help you. And just saying, you know, we want to appreciate you, maybe there's a nurse or there's a key worker on your street, and just like giving them award, giving them, I think there's huge value in that. So I think that's a great idea as a potential kickoff activity.
Maybe I can just jump in quickly and say I experienced on the weekend the power of being nudged into doing something in a community. And if you're not in the mood for it, sometimes you need a little bit of a nudge or someone to say, oh, why don't you do it? So naming the person. But sometimes, you know, you need these little catalysts like that. And most people, I find, will go for it. So especially if there are 50 pairs of eyes on them. But you know, it's just another little sort of way to get people involved who might want to be involved, but they don't have the courage or something.
Yeah, I think understanding leadership. Mark's written a great book called Host Leadership, but I started companies without having any knowledge of leadership, and it's only over time that I've understood how important it is. And leadership is getting other people to work willingly together to a common goal. So you need to define your goals, and like I think the world is on your side if you're trying to build a village. You know, you're not trying to do anything that, like as Adrian said, you need to sometimes nudge people. Different people are motivated by different things. Maybe having a newsletter and saying, thank you, Adrian, for your cakes, or whatever it was. Just like appreciation, saying thank you, but making people visible. It can really change their lives. And so be generous in your praise. And if you're annoyed with people, have it as a one-on-one, not in a Zoom call. Like, never lose your temper in a meeting. Lose your temper after the meeting. And you, by the way, that's one thing. You will find there are some disruptive, toxic people who can poison your village. You need to isolate them. And it's a very tricky, and I can give some mentoring on that another time, but you need to look out for time wasters, people who want to change the agenda, say, well, if we're not going to talk about global warming, I'm not going to come, and they start disrupting, you know, they have, and I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about global warming, but you need to be careful about people who try to hijack your village to their cause, that it can be a subgroup. So, you know, as well as getting the right people in the room, you need to have your limits of what's not acceptable as well.
Thanks, Richard. Other questions? Joan, hello.
Oh, am I muted? I'm interested in that because how do we, you know, one of the beauties of people knowing their neighbours is that if they do find they've got mutual interests, they can go away and talk about climate change or whatever. So I get what you're saying about you want to keep the village and the city as the main positive thing. And I really get that people can be really toxic because, or that there can be group dynamics. You know, there's a theory about forming, storming, norming. So there's naturally going to be some conflict. But I don't know, how do you do that without being quite dictatorial? You know, how do you keep on the focus on the initial stages? And how do you say to people, well, if you want to start that up and 3 and 4 of you want to do that, but you know, our focus here is this, because I don't think you can forbid things. No.
And I've got a theory of meeting manipulation. If you have the list of things that you think are really important, and these are things that that's the reason you started the village. If you keep those objectives in mind, and anytime anyone in a meeting says things in line with your objectives, you say, you put that in the meeting summary. And if someone comes up with, well, let's have a field trip to, you know, Land's End or John O'Groats, you say, Susan, that's a brilliant idea. Or not a brilliant idea. If you can make that happen, that's great. You don't forbid it, but you just say, you know, we need to focus on things locally. So, you know, we can have a field trip if you can lead it and other people want to go. I'm not going to, I said, I'm absolutely, and just in your briefing, you just say, you know, the main thing is don't expect me to organize your things for you. I'm here to support your things. And if you've got projects I can help with, that's great. But I think you're absolutely right. Don't be dictatorial and forbid it, but just come back to your core objectives and keep those center stage. And you know, it can be tricky, and sometimes, you know, anyone who's led anything knows about difficult people. They exist.
Yeah, and the reason I'm interested in that was when somebody asked, do you have rules? At a previous meeting, somebody said, oh, we hadn't needed them in our neighbourhood. But I live in a neighbourhood where a lot of the disputes get settled with baseball bats. So, you know, little conflicts between the children fighting, your child pulled my child's hair, can end up, there's a man who's been brain damaged by a baseball attack because of that kind of incident unravelling locally. So for me, we need to have some kind of safety mechanisms, because conflict can get nasty.
I mean, one thing that I can show you, which might be, I'm just seeing if this is from a TED Circle meeting, that if you've got a projector or slides, like it's worth at the start of every meeting talking about your code of conduct and your housekeeping rules, just so that, you know, here we're in a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-generational group, and you know, it maybe, you know, there's an issue that's really hot and difficult in your community, so you don't focus on that, and it might be racism, it might be hostility to some groups or whatever. You say, like, in this meeting we want people to be patient, tolerant, and supportive, you know, and just say, you set the tone, and you just have to say what you say, put it in your Facebook group, say it at the start of every meeting, and you can't stop people, but it's a good idea to, like, just keep banging away. In our community, our street is a welcoming street, you know, just, you can't say it too often. And, you know, if there are people who say, look, well, let's keep out all the people from Poland, you say, well, actually, no. If there's someone from Poland in this room, you're welcome. And, you know, then you're leading, because then people will come up to you after and say, Joan, I'm so glad you said that, you know, that needed to be said, you know. And if the people who don't want visitors from other countries in your street realize that they're not part of your village and the city community, that was a line that needed to be drawn. So sometimes you do have to be brave and challenge people, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that thoroughly, Richard. One of the things that marks out a village in the city, as opposed to, let's say, a sort of climate change group, is that it's inclusive, and it should be aiming to involve everyone. And that means, yes, you can have a climate change to the subgroup, but you also need to involve the owner of the gas guzzler, who doesn't give a monkeys about climate change yet, because it is by being part of a group that they will maybe find out and become more educated and whatever. So yes, we want the climate change people, but not at the cost of the other people. And so that's, in a big picture sense, you know, if we're having different sorts of things, and that's the power of these things like summer parties and Christmas fairs and everything. It is the sort of thing you can invite everybody to. It's not a sort of strongly cause-based thing. It's a strongly place-based thing. And I think there's a scope for both of these things in a village in the city. Well, folks, we're coming towards the end of the time. I'm delighted to say that we have our next call lined up. It's going to be Wednesday, the 7th of October, and it will be on the benefits of community with my old friend Sanderson Jones, who was the founder of Sunday Assembly, the so-called atheist church, and now who runs an initiative called the Lifefulness Project, which is about bringing the power of community to all sorts of people. And he's a great guy and a very lively and enthusiastic fellow. And that's Wednesday, the 7th of October, 4 p.m. usual time. The link is in the chat. And of course, I will be sending out reminders and things with the recording of this call. If you haven't signed up for information on Village in the City yet, please do. That's a great way of making sure we keep in touch with occasional messages. And we'd love to hear from, if anyone was thinking about putting your village on the map or wondering about the next steps, or just wants to talk through where you are, I'm here and I'm available. So please just drop me a line, drop me an email, and we can make a time to have a chat. So if that's what you want to do, then that's what I'm here to do. So many, many thanks to Richard for being our guest today, to all of you for coming along, and I hope we'll see you again next time and somewhere along the road. So thanks everyone, and good luck with your village building.
Thank you.
Cheers for now. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Great call. Bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks very much.
Oh, if anyone else to say, if anyone wants to hang on and ask a question, please feel free. Folk are winding up. Nick, that's one of these days I must ask you about the question I sometimes have, which is, you're a minister of the cloth, obviously.
Yeah.
And so in one sense, people like me who are godless and proud of it might think you are there solely to represent your flock. But I suspect you see yourself as having a wider role than that. Is that?
Yeah. All of humanity and all of creation.
Oh, right.
So it's not, it's not just people that see themselves as God-fearing Episcopalians. I talk to everyone.
What do you say? How do you get across to everybody that you're trying to promote community and you're not there to promote your faith in that?
I just talk to people. I mean, the one good thing about having a dog collar in that is that people will come and talk to me, even if they're atheists, agnostics, or humanists or whatever. People will tend to just come and have a chat, and you just take an interest in them. And I don't talk about faith. I'm interested in how people live good lives, how they're able to flourish, how they're able to have well-being, what makes them tick, what works for them. If you ask inquisitive, appreciative questions of people, you have tremendous conversations, and so people will eventually get round to talking about faith. Some people immediately say, "Well, I'm really sorry, I haven't got a faith, but," and I think, well, that doesn't matter. I'm not about to, get my Bible out and bash over the head with it. That's the last thing on my mind.
That's good. We might have make that topic of a call one day, because I think it can look a bit scary sometimes to people, when you're in uniform and people aren't quite sure what your role is in the in the locality. And I always thought that church folk ought to be good allies in these things if you approach them.
Yeah, I mean, the Scottish Episcopal Church uses a priest of inquiry all the time in much of what we do, and that to me is a good basis of any conversation. And Mark, you must live pretty close to St Mary's Cathedral, so
in our village.
Yes, there's a fair number of clergy. John Conway, who's the provost there, a lovely guy, and Marion Chatterley, she's the vice provost. Brilliant, set up there. So Joan, whereabouts are you in
my early childhood experiences were of church people being quite opportunistic. The Bible thumping kind of version of the youth clubs had the people going around trying to capture them to get them involved, and everybody would have stories about, there's a catch involved. And I'm really lucky that through my community work I've met fantastic people with faith and watched them in action, and I've thought those earlier people are not representative. But when I asked you that question about how do you let people know that, because when I tried to promote that you were doing this, and I sent emails to loads of people that I knew out in Pennycook, and a bit of me was like, oh God, will they think that it's just a church focused thing? And I was stressing, this this whole project isn't there. But I think because a lot of people will be like me, that they've had experience of that opportunism, which didn't feel safe, and isn't from your perspective. It was different.
I mean, I would love it if more people came into church and my church was rich in money and people on pews. But actually, if I go with that mentality, I'll scare people off. What I have to do is show them what I think I'm charged to do is to try and bring God's kingdom down to earth. In our daily prayers, we say the Lord's Prayer, and it talks about, your kingdom come. And, God's kingdom is one where people live a flourishing life, where they are the best person they can be. And if I can encourage people to be that person, I'm doing God's mission. It'd be nice if they came in my church, but that's secondary to helping people live the life that they're called to live.
Thank you, Nick.
And
That's very interesting. It might be an interesting topic for a call one of these days. You know, how to engage your local churches or something like that.
Because I was going to say that, you know, one of the potentials is perhaps sort of a multi-faith and like talking to local other religious leaders. And I was also thinking, and we had the guys from the local municipal. We had an environmental themed event a couple of years ago in Krakow. We had the guy from the local refuse collection come and give a talk about how they do it. And, you know, when I was growing up, it was a very low status thing, but I think we've all become aware of the fact that waste is really, and how you deal with it is really, really important. And one of the things I put on that presentation that I didn't read out was, you know, inviting meet the X, and it could be meet the postman, meet the local policeman, policewoman. And I don't know, it depends what people want, but, you know, I think there are people, there's a chance to bring sort of politics and government bodies and you know, local institutions and mix them up with the village, because even if you want to put up a village notice board, you probably need to talk to the council somehow about doing that and that kind of, but I think it's important not to get too ambitious too early as well.
Exactly.
You know,
but there are things like, do you know the name of your postie? You know, most people don't. So why not? Why do you not? Why do you not?
Here's James.
Anyway, we could go on for ages, but it's. But there are simple, everyday conversations you can hold. Admittedly, I know more the dogs' names than I know the owners' names, but you know, sort of. And I have a dog, and she's a wonderful ministry tool. You know,
I was just writing the Village Builders Handbook the other day, and it struck me that I mentioned dog owners have a start on the rest of us, because there's an immediate engagement. You know, on the dog walking grounds between people with dogs, and that's actually a really good thing.
I used to live in Morton Hall up on Frogston Road, and I knew everybody around the estate there that had a dog. You know, and we all used to dog walk and see each other, and I knew